Hi, I'm Ida Reis, certified divorce lending professional with the Divorce Lending Association. And this interview is part of the Divorce Literacy Series. And today I have with me Alex Meeks, who is a family law and an estate attorney. Welcome, Alex.
Oh, thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, thank you for being here. We're really excited to have you. Would you kindly tell us a little bit about your background? That'd be great.
Sure. I was licensed to practice law in New York about 16 years ago. I spent the first decade or so of my practice actually representing children in family law matters. So in family court in Brooklyn, New York. And from that background, I really bring a family-focused attitude to every matter that I encounter. I moved to Maryland about 4 years ago. And since that time, I've been in private practice, mainly doing estate planning, estate litigation, and family law. So the litigation background is really, really helpful in planning because I've seen how things can go awry. And I really love helping people get solid plans in place, either through custody or divorce agreements on the family law side, or on the estate planning side through their estate planning documents to avoid those litigation nightmares.
Sure. Where do you spend most of your time in the family law space? What kind of is it? So you're trying to avoid litigation, you said. So what else? This mediation, collaborative. Tell us about that.
So I'm trained as a mediator, and I'm also trained as a collaborative attorney. I love deploying those where I can. I also sometimes will help people in a more limited capacity than representing them in the full litigation. Sometimes people just need an hour or two of good counsel, and they don't necessarily need, an attorney for their full matter. But I also represent people as their full attorney in a litigation.
So you're also an estate attorney. So could you tell us about how the family law practice and the estate planning practice sort of overlaps? What are the issues that a divorcing couple should think about?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. And I definitely feel that having background in both helps me on both sides to give people a fuller idea of what pitfalls to avoid. So one thing for divorcing couples that I'm always telling clients is to take a look at their beneficiary designations. So when you sign up for retirement accounts or life insurance, a number of different kinds of policies, you're indicating in a form who you want to receive those assets if you should pass away. And in the state of Maryland, at least, divorcing doesn't change that. So it's really important that if you don't want that spouse to be the person, now that spouse is an ex, if you don't want them to receive that life insurance policy, you need to change your form. Very important. Some other things are addressed automatically. So if you've named your spouse, for instance, in your will, they will automatically be removed from the will when you are divorced. At least that's the case here in Maryland. It's really important that people take a look at their state laws and know how the divorce impacts their estate planning. But it's also important to go ahead and revisit that document, right? Maybe you've named, your spouse will be erased as it is, but that doesn't mean that you have someone else placed in that position to receive that asset or to serve that role, whatever it was where their name was. You want to make sure you have someone else in that place. And also, importantly, I think a lot of times people forget, maybe you've named some of your spouse's extended family. Maybe you named your sister-in-law as your personal representative, and you're going to want to revisit that. That might not be who you want in that role anymore.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, Ida, I think it's important when you're divorcing to make sure you're thinking about death when you're drafting your agreement, your divorce agreement. And that's not often the top of mind.
Yeah.
But so say you have small children who are going to need support over many years. What happens if your ex passes away and they're no longer able to pay your child support? You know, sometimes people will put a life insurance policy in place or plan otherwise to ensure that that child will be cared for and supported. So it's important, you know, to look at those things. And then the last thing I noted here to bring up also was to address the family home. Because a lot of times the family home is a big deal in a divorce, and who is going to get the family home. And it's more and more common, especially with mortgage rates being higher, for people to decide to keep the house together for a period of time, whether that's indefinitely or even just for a shorter period of time. So it's important to remember that if you're married, you're probably owning that house as tenants by the entirety, which is a special way you can hold title. And once you're divorced, that's no longer the case. And so that really impacts your rights and obligations around that property and what will happen to it on your death. So, you know, it's super important that you meet with the right professionals to find out how the divorce is going to impact, you know, your rights and obligations around your property.
How about, I just had a thought when we were talking, I thought, well, wait a minute. And I haven't noted, really, I don't read the section, like the section where you address the death of a parent, and then you have the guardianship issues. What if both parents pass or one parent passes? Do you normally address that in a divorce agreement? And if not, where does it, and if it's already addressed in a will, it's, it's a, you decided maybe somebody that you wouldn't want to take your children because, now you're divorced. So maybe you could address that.
I'm glad you brought that up because, when you're divorced, you're each putting together your own estate planning documents separate and apart from one another. So each of you is going to list who you would like to be the guardian of your child in the event that you pass away. And this would be an unlikely scenario, but an unfortunate one. If both parents were to pass away while that child is still a minor, then whoever passed away second, that's the person whose guardianship designation would be relevant, and the others wouldn't be considered by the court because they're not the person who's passed away at the time the child is needing that care. So I do encourage people to talk about that and get on the same page about it. Even if they can't agree on many other things, to have that continuity between the two wills is definitely preferable if you're able to make that kind of an agreement.
Yeah. Now, is that so that sort of a modification would not be in the actual divorce decree, but would be in a will?
It would be in the will. I mean, I suppose you probably could agree in your divorce decree that both of you will name, a certain person as the guardian in your will. But a will can be amended at any time, right? So as practically speaking, someone could change that designation.
Yeah, that's true, because if a child is 2 or 3 at the time of divorce, and then we're talking 10 years later. Yeah,
lots of things happen. And then also it's important to remember too, that the court always reviews that decision. So just because you've named someone as a guardian in your papers doesn't necessarily mean the court will agree. They still have to find it's in that child's best interest to be under the guardianship of that individual.
Okay. And have you run into any scenarios where you have a blended family, which I imagine might be a bit complicated?
Yeah.
And, like, how do you, so you might have younger children and maybe there's some from each spouse. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, that does. It comes up a fair amount, Ida. And on the estate planning side, there are certainly some tools you can use to address that, because just as I was saying before, that anyone is free to change their will at any point. So you can imagine a situation with a blended family. Maybe the father has children from a previous marriage who he intends to leave money to, but then he also wants to provide for his now spouse. And so how do you ensure that the spouse is taken care of for their lifetime, but that the spouse doesn't then, if they just inherit everything outright, they can write their will however they want and write out the children, right? And not provide for his children. So what we would typically do in a situation like that is trust planning. So there are very common types of trusts that are set up that can provide for that spouse during their lifetime, and that they can benefit from those funds during their life, but that preserve the corpus of it, preserve those assets for children, or honestly, whoever it is that you wanted to provide for.
Okay. All right. And did I miss anything? Do you have any thoughts that really should be said for the benefit of our listeners that we didn't cover?
I feel like the overarching thing that I would say on both sides, on the family law side and on the estate planning side, is when it comes to divorce, is just to have clarity and really disentangle, right? So I hate to see people go through a divorce and then they're left with where they're still entangled financially in one way or another, and there's not clarity on how that's going to be handled. That's never good. So you want to gather a team of professionals who can guide you through making sure that your divorce agreements, that your estate planning documents, that all those things are clear and that they align with one another. I've just seen so many people do it themselves because they think they have a simple situation, but I've seen lots of simple agreements leave people in a real pickle. So it's always good, to speak with a professional, like assemble your team. I don't always know all the answers, and when I don't, I call in my trusted professional friends like you to help me with advising my clients well about the issues, maybe where I need some guidance. So I certainly encourage clients to do the same, to assemble a good team and then make sure that that they've got clarity on what their agreement says.
Yes, that's great. And if you had to give any, other than that, any other heads up sort of advice in either arena, family law or estate planning, what would that be? Is there anything else?
Yeah, I'd say it's worth spending some money to get it done right the first time rather than trying to do it yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I so appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for letting us interview you today and give some wisdom to our listeners. And would you kindly tell us what is the best way to contact you? Maybe, I don't know if it's your website or phone number.
Yeah, my website is probably the easiest way. In fact, potential clients either in New York or Maryland can make at least a quick initial appointment with me right on my website. And that's www.acornlawllc.com.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. Thank you, Alex.
Take care.